there by the end of the week, but there are some at the White House saying that they might hold it over until January after the holidays, because then they could start the new year off really with a bang.
But it would be in effect done except for the signature.
It would be done, and it would take effect in the tax year of 2018.
Ed Henry, thank you for that summary. Appreciate it. Congresswoman Kristi Noem is a Republican representing the state of South Dakota, and she joins us now. Congresswoman, thanks for coming on.
Absolutely, Tucker.
Is this the tax bill you wanted?
You know, it is a very good bill. It's a compromise between the House and the Senate bills. I was on the conference committee that negotiated the differences, and so this is one that is going to benefit the American people. It prioritizes families and this country again.
Telling people their taxes are going down is good news. I mean, everyone's for that. Why hasn't it broken 50% in popularity? You know,
I think that a lot of what the Democrats are saying out there is just lacking the facts, and they're spinning a lot of shameful claims about this bill that we just as Republicans need to get there and tell the truth. You know, in my state of South Dakota, the average household income is $54,000 per calendar year. For our families that are in that situation, they're paying over $800 in taxes now. They're going to get a tax reimbursement now of $730. That's almost a $1,600 difference for those families. And when you're making $54,000 a year, that's life-changing.
That seems a pretty simple message. Why has it been so hard to sell that? I don't understand.
You know, I don't know. I think that we have been, as a member of Ways and Means Committee, I've been in the room working on the policy, making sure that it works very well. And the politics of divide and scaring people has been effective in this country, and it's time that we start offering them real change that makes a difference in their pocketbook. So
the average family in your state gets $1,600 extra bucks a year.
But that's not even counting the growth in our economy that will result in increased wages.
Right.
As well.
So, but I mean, that's kind of hard to project. I think we both.
It's hard to project, but it also.
So, but 14% corporate tax cut. People look at this and say, well, gee, you know, Dow is at record highs. Do companies which are posting record profits really need this tax cut?
Oh, absolutely, because the reason that they're posting record profits is because of the expectation that this tax reform would happen. If you look at what happened under the Obama administration, our growth stagnated. We did not see the stock market doing well. I think the status quo we've proven is unacceptable, and that's why this tax package is necessary. We not only need to cut rates for individuals, but get companies coming back to this country, get them hiring folks, putting them into higher paying jobs. That's what's really going to turn it around.
So the carried interest loophole is a small thing by the numbers, but it's symbolically powerful. The president ran on it again and again, saying, I'm going to drain the swamp by getting rid of this carve-out that allows private equity people and hedge fund managers, the richest people in our society, to pay half the tax that you pay. It's still there. Why?
We certainly had that debate back and forth between the House and the Senate. You know, I think that every single provision in this bill we based on low and middle income families and then growth. We did not want to discourage growth in this country. So we made sure we changed our international tax, made sure we changed our corporate tax to make us competitive and allow that reinvestment of dollars into our economy that's going to actually create the jobs.
Right. But I mean, hedge fund managers don't create jobs that I'm aware of. Not a lot of jobs, maybe outside Stanford and Greenwich. And they've gotten really rich during a period of economic stagnation for a lot of other people. Who was for this specifically? I mean, look, you could argue it's a small thing, but it's a thing, and it's contrary to what the president promised, and I think it would be interesting to know who lobbied to keep this in.
You know, I don't think anybody really lobbied to keep it in, specifically to me or to my office as a member of the Ways and Means Committee. I focused on the child tax credit, worked with Ivanka and Marco Rubio on that extensively, worked a lot on the small business provisions, so I worked on interest deductibility, expensing. I also worked extensively on things that were important for small businesses and farmers and ranchers, which I am one, like eliminating the death tax. So those were all provisions that I focused on making sure that we were going to get our tax policy straight and reformed on.
So, just to close that out, it's not clear how this wound up there, but it's there.
You know, all of these had debate, and when the decision was made, you know, what was so impressive was how Chairman Brady handled this process. He's the chairman of Ways and Means, and was also the chairman of this conference committee. We would put forward proposals. The entire Republican conference would give feedback on. We would put in place those provisions that helped us with the growth numbers, helped us bring relief to families, and then the bill would change. So I think one of the reasons that we're sitting here on this historic historic day with tax reform being done for the first time in over 30 years, it's because of that give and take process that we had. So there was debate between members of the conference and bipartisan committee hearings that were held, even bipartisan discussions at the White House, that this bill was the result of.
So these are both process questions, but because they were things that Republicans said, 8 or 9 years ago about Obamacare, I think they're worth asking. This basically is going through on a party line vote, no Democrats supporting it. And at least some Republicans have conceded they didn't read it before voting on it. You'd kind of want to avoid those if you could, right? Just because Republicans always said, and I said about Obamacare, you didn't even read it. You know what I mean? You couldn't get a single Republican. How'd we get to that?
We honestly did have a lot of bipartisan discussions on this. I've been on Ways and Means for several years. We've had many, many bipartisan hearings on tax reform proposals. Economists come before the committee. We had a farmer from South Dakota come and talk about what would be important provisions to have in this tax reform bill. So the fact that the Democrats stand on TV and say that they weren't consulted is absolutely not true. I sat in the White House with President Trump while we had bipartisan discussions on tax reform.
I believe
so that simply can be proven to be not true. They were consulted. They didn't want to play ball. They didn't want to help the American people, so that's why this is now a Republican bill. And Americans are going to see benefits out of this bill that they'll realize next year when their paychecks are bigger.
That's my last question. If you're scoring at home, how do you know if this works, and when will you find?
In January, your paycheck will be bigger. There'll be less withholding taken out of your paycheck. You'll see that result immediately. Even small businesses that have payroll, they'll see more money that they have to reinvest in their business and to increase wages. They'll also take advantage of that standard deduction, the increased child tax credit. They'll see interest deductibility available, a new small business tax deduction that's in place that has never been there before. So we really prioritize those that are the job creators in this country, recognizing that what we need to see is this economy turn around.
Kristi Noem, thanks very much, Congressman.
Thank you, Tucker. Appreciate it.
A new report details how the Obama administration allowed the terror group Hezbollah to import narcotics into the United States in the middle of the worst drug epidemic in our history. How'd that happen exactly? An Obama foreign policy advisor tries to answer that question next. Hate to promote Politico, which is pretty bad most of the time, but they had a remarkable piece a couple of days ago. We will concede that. And it explained how the Obama administration's Justice and State Departments deliberately undercut efforts to bring down $1 billion drug cartel linked to Hezbollah, the terror group. It all happened in secret, apparently with the goal of getting a nuclear deal with Iran. How did this happen? Eli Lake is a columnist at Bloomberg. He's written about national security and foreign policy for many years and joins us now. Eli, first question. Is the story from your reporting essentially true?
Well, it fits a pattern with what I would call the sort of increasing price of the Iran deal, which is that we keep learning later of other concessions that were made that, were not part of the original explanation of that nuclear deal to the American public. And I've also heard the more general concern that, as a general rule, the Obama administration went softer on, lots of kind of Iran's regional predations. But the specifics of this particular story, I think, I know the reporter Josh Meyer, I think it's solid. And
but it's one thing to say, look, we're not going to hassle Iranian diplomats, or we're going to look the other way at nonsense going on in Lebanon. But Hezbollah teaming up with the Zetas, the Mexican drug cartel, to import tons of cocaine into the United States in the middle of a drug epidemic seems like a pretty big thing to overlook.
It's not just that, and you're right, that is a big deal from a drug enforcement perspective.
Yeah.
It's also an illicit stream of income to the main arm of Iran's foreign policy.
So if you can explain that to
region.
our viewers quickly who didn't read the piece.
Yeah, well, what it basically is that there was a two-way operation. It laundered money back to Hezbollah, but it also was a drug trafficking network. But one of the things that it means is also it's a way for Hezbollah to sort of have a revenue stream to then support their activities in Syria and Iraq and other places in the region where they're causing a lot of mayhem on Iran's behalf.
So there's no question that the Obama people knew this was going on and overlooked it because they felt the Iran deal was so important. Is there any way, and I know you're probably not a fan of the Iran deal, but is there any way, do you think, ethically, to justify that decision?
Well, there are decisions that are made all the time between law enforcement and intelligence gathering, and that is a real thing. And you could, I think, proponents of the deal would say that it's very important to do what you can to try to disarm as much as you can for the 10 to 15 years that the Iran deal lasts. My issue in particular is that all of these sorts of concessions that the Obama administration made should have been told to the American people up front when Congress was voting on it in 2015 and they were selling it to the American people.
Is there any indication that members of Congress knew that this was going on, that the DEA was being prevented from interdicting drug trafficking on behalf of the DEA?
Well, that I did a little bit of reporting on, and I can tell you that Republican members are shocked at this point. There has been some pushback from Obama alumni, but they haven't really addressed the central claims of the article.
And the pushback has consisted of?
They've consisted of saying, well, the on-the-record sources are affiliated with biased think tanks, but that's, I think, pretty weak.
Yeah.
I mean, the on-the-record sources also, one of them was in this task force who was telling his story, and there were anonymous sources as well. So it was sort of, you know, if you can't dispute the facts, you know, dispute the sources, that kind of thing.
That's always the way. Eli, thank you for that.
Thank you.
David Teferi is a former State Department official. He advised Barack Obama's presidential campaigns on questions of foreign policy, and he joins us tonight. So, David, 60,000 people died last year of drug ODs. I think we're sort of beyond the point where we can pretend that there's not a massive historic drug crisis going on in America, and yet the Obama administration, as that crisis was ramping up, in effect allowed tons of narcotics to come into the country knowingly. That seems jaw-dropping to me.
Well, this is really a story about terrorism and about our Iran policy. We can agree on a couple things. First of all, that Hezbollah does support terrorism, that Hezbollah is an arm of Iran, and it carries out Iran's anti-American, anti-Western agenda. So we should be using law enforcement to confront Hezbollah, and we have been doing that. This story suggests, however, that the Obama administration pulled back on a major law enforcement investigation in order to support the Iran deal. That is troubling if true. However, this story is thinly supported, and Eli Lake noted some of the ways in which it's thinly supported. It's basically based on two former DA agents who have an agenda. I have a contact. He just left the Treasury Department last summer. He says that this is a disgusting hit job by a cabal of people with an agenda. Okay, so there are two sides to this story.
Well, that's not a side, actually. That's an ad hominem attack on the reporting without offering countervailing evidence. Let me stipulate that all stories in Washington come with an agenda, explicit or not. So of course there are agendas.
Well, this comes from
But is he saying that it's untrue, that the Obama people knew that Hezbollah was partnering with the Mexican drug cartel to import cocaine by the ton into the United States and launder terror money? They did know that, correct?
If you look at his tweets, he is saying it's not true. The interagency process, which involves the intelligence community, the State Department, Treasury, folks like him who were on the sanctions policy group were monitoring this very closely, and they did not agree that the Obama administration suddenly changed its policy. Now, if the Obama administration did, that is problematic. But the problem is this 50-page plus story with lots of details is really just based on the testimony of just two people, and that's problematic. So it needs further investigation before you indict the entire Obama administration.
I don't know that that's true, and I'm not indicting the entire Obama administration. The show is not long enough to do that. They might enjoy it. I'm merely saying that this piece purportedly is based on interviews with dozens of people, it says, directly involved in this. There's an on-the-record piece of written testimony before Congress from an Obama Treasury official saying that a specific DEA operation, Cassandra, meant to interdict cocaine shipments here, was stymied on purpose. So is that true or not? It sounds like it is true. How is that not true?
There are plenty of quotes in the article that also from people in the Obama administration who said, no, that's not true. No, that the Obama administration did not pull back.
With respect,
there's one right here.
I read the piece carefully.
The White House did not attempt to curb the DEA-led efforts against Hezbollah because of the Iran deal. That's a direct quote from the article.
Because of the Iran deal. Then on what ground? There's not one line in that piece that says the facts are not true. It's a question of motive. So they're saying, you know, look, this is complex. And by the way, there's some truth in this. These are complex. And as Eli just noted, there's often a debate between the intel people and the law enforcement people. I get it. There are a lot of priorities at stake. But in no part of that piece does it say that the administration didn't lean on DEA to stop being so aggressive with Hezbollah. No one denies that.
Well, you highlighted an important thing, which is there were a lot of different objectives at work here. And there was another objective, which was to reach the Iran deal in order to curb Iran's effort to develop nuclear weapons. That was equally important. We should have been doing both, and I would hope that we were able to do both. This report suggests we weren't, but it is, again, based on just a couple of people's testimony.
No, it's not actually. It's based, again, on the testimony firsthand of dozens of people. But let's get to the point that Eli made, which is that Congress, which voted on this, had no idea this was going on. So how exactly does that work? Why should the democratically elected Congress of the United States, whose constitutional duty it is to approve or disapprove a deal like this, why shouldn't they have all the facts before doing that? Why did the administration lie to them? I don't understand.
Well, Congress definitely should have had all of the facts.
But
Congress, there's plenty of legislation in Congress right now that is anti-Hezbollah that would help with the effort to confront Hezbollah. And Congress has the opportunity now, based on these facts and others, to vote in favor of that legislation.
Slow down. The deal is done, okay? First of all of those narcotics came into this country, and again, 60,000 people died last year. So you can't argue that it's not shaking American society to its foundations. Drug addiction, it is, and this is part of the problem. But more than that, the Iran deal is in place, and decertifying it, undoing it, pulling out of it has all kinds of other ramifications. It's like Obamacare. Once you're in, it's kind of hard to get out, actually. So why didn't Congress know before approving this the whole story?
We don't know everything that Congress knew. I mean, there's
members of Congress say
the intelligence committees on Congress, they get classified information, and they were probably getting some of this information.
So Treasury called over and said, but just so you know, in order to kind of sweeten the deal, we're letting Hezbollah, which we've designated a terror organization, to partner with the Zetas in the Mexican civil drug war, import tons of cocaine into the country. Hope you're cool with that.
Well, Tucker, you're also overlooking the fact that some of this was public knowledge. The people who were arrested, one of the people is a Hezbollah person who was arrested in Prague. That was public information. So there was some information that was publicly out there about this.
What wasn't public is that the parts of the U.S. government tried to extradite that Hezbollah official from Prague, and were stymied in their efforts by the Obama administration, which didn't want to rock the boat with Iran. I mean, that's a perfect example, as outlined in the piece. They let the guy sit there, and now he's back in Beirut selling arms to people who shouldn't have them.
That's the position this article takes. We don't know if that's true or not. But I also want to talk about something else. The Trump administration has not changed the policy towards Hezbollah one iota. For instance, the Trump administration has looked the other way as Hezbollah-linked militias in Iraq have taken back territory. In fact, some of them are using U.S. arms that were supplied to the Iraqi army, and the Iraqi army gave it to the Hashd al-Shabi, which is basically a Hezbollah-linked militia.
One of the reasons the Iraq war
So are you upset about that as well?
I think the Iraq war empowered Iran and Hezbollah, its client. Yes, I do.
We agree about that.
Right. But I guess the point I'm making is you can debate Hezbollah and their role on the world stage, but you can't debate it's a bad idea to allow a terror group to import cocaine into your country. That's all I'm saying.
We both agree on that.
Okay. David Jafari, thank you.
Thank you.
Taylor Swift got on the cover of Time magazine for accusing a man of groping. But the man she accused says she was able to destroy his life, his reputation, and get him fired before he could even respond to the charges. So we're giving him a chance to do that next.
Not any data or evidence to debunk anything that perhaps I could have debunked if I had known what we were talking about anyway, but they wouldn't allow me to present any evidence, and they, frankly, didn't give me due process.
Tavis Smiley told us on the show yesterday that his career has been unjustifiably ruined by anonymous and unproven allegations. He's not the only one who feels his reputation's been destroyed in this moment. This 2013 photo from TMZ shows pop star Taylor Swift with a radio show host called David Mueller. Swift accused Mueller of groping her in the picture. He was fired almost immediately. And this month, Taylor Swift was on the cover of Time magazine as a so-called silence breaker. Mueller says he was never given a chance to defend himself before he was canned and destroyed. David Mueller joins us now. David, thanks for coming on.
Good evening, Tucker. Thanks for having me on.
Good evening. So we have the picture. It looks like you're guilty. What about this are we misreading?
Well, I've always said the picture was awkward. I wasn't ready. My girlfriend was talking to Taylor just prior to the photo being snapped, and I was several feet away. I tried to slide into the photo as best as I could, and And that was the result. But my hand was never under her skirt. I never grabbed her, and my hand wasn't even open.
Huh. So did she say anything to you at the moment?
No, nobody did, Tucker.
So she didn't whip around and
Not
say,
even-
get your hands off me or anything like that?
No, and her bodyguard was right there, 5 feet away, and he didn't do anything.
And your girlfriend was, of course, there too. She's in the picture as well. So when did you
That's
first
right.
learn she was accusing you of touching her?
We left the backstage area. I left the arena. A half an hour later, we were on the main floor, and I was approached by a large British bodyguard, and he wanted to talk to me. And that was when I found out that I was being accused.
What did he say?
He said, do you want to tell me what happened earlier? And I said, I'd love to. I don't know what you're talking about. And then he proceeded to tell me that I grabbed Taylor Swift's rear end. And I said, I did not. I didn't grab anybody. And then I asked for the police. I asked him to get my boss, my direct supervisor from the radio station. I knew he was there. And but my girlfriend tried to interject because she was in the photo tent, and they told her to be quiet. Next thing you know, we got thrown out. We were told we'd never be allowed at a Taylor Swift concert for life. It was a lifetime ban, and we were on the curb. I never got to talk to my boss or the Denver Police Department.
But you asked for your boss and the police right then and there. So what happened next?
I asked for the police several. I asked for the police several times, and the next day I had to go in and talk to my bosses at the radio station, KYGO. And I had a talent agent. I contacted my talent agent. I talked to my girlfriend's family because they were really the only people I was close to in Denver at the time. And I went in and talked to my bosses, and I told them I didn't do anything, and they said, well, why would she say that? And I said,
Yeah.
I don't know. Ask her.
Well, do you,
can
do
just
you
tell-
know? So you were fired. She has become a kind of living symbol of the resistance to British behavior like this, as a survivor. You say it's all made up. Why would she make it up?
That's a good question. The short answer is a business decision. You know, that my bosses never talked to Taylor Swift or anyone else who was in the photo tent other than my girlfriend and me. And my girlfriend and I told my bosses at KYGO nothing happened. And they talked to one person from her group, from Team Taylor.
Yeah.
They never talked to Taylor. The first time I heard that Taylor Swift actually was accusing me was when she filed a counterclaim to my lawsuit. That's the first time. I didn't even know that she had said it, because when I was there, you would think she would have slapped me or said, dude, get your hand off me. She never said a word to me. I had no idea there was a problem, because there wasn't a problem.
How has this affected your life?
Well, the biggest thing it's done to me is put me in a position where I have to prove that I'm innocent, which is almost impossible. But I've done the best I can. I sat down for 2 independent polygraphs. I passed them both. I'm willing to do another one. I've talked to all my friends in radio. I've tried to recover from this career-wise. And so far, I don't have many promising leads. I have a chance to get back in radio. I won't be at the level I was at. I don't have a girlfriend. My girlfriend stayed with me for a while, but it was hard. And when she knew that I was going to file a lawsuit, that was a bit much for her to handle. But I didn't have any recourse. I had to, because I asked them to give me something in writing saying there was a misunderstanding. And there was nothing else I could do. I had to file a lawsuit.
Wow. Well, I don't know anything other than what you've just told us, but it's clear that your life has been basically destroyed by this. So I'll let our
in a
viewers
sense
judge for themselves. David, thank you for coming on.
Thank you, Tucker.
The Senate thinks it may have found another Russian agent in this country. We'll give you 3 guesses. You'll never guess it, actually. It's Green Party presidential candidate Jill Stein. She's the secret agent. We'll take. UFO sightings. They're for crazy people. Everybody knows that. Everyone's known that for decades. Maybe time to reassess what we think of UFOs. This past weekend, the Pentagon confirmed the existence of a $22 million a year program that investigated unidentifying flying objects. Did it from 2007 to 2012. Commander David Fravor worked as a Navy pilot for 18 years. In an interview yesterday, he described his encounter. It happened in 2003. He came across an aircraft that he says was, quote, not something from Earth. It was shaped like a tic-tac. It had no wings. It could hover in place. It moved faster than anything he had ever seen as a pilot. It appeared to defy the laws of physics as we understand them. Now, Fravor doesn't seem like a crazy man. We entrusted him with an airplane in the U.S. military. And if he's not crazy, then what he saw deserves serious consideration. No joke. David Fravor will be on the show tomorrow to tell us what he saw. We'll discuss the implications of it. Don't miss that. Well, anti-Russia hysteria in Washington has gotten to such a place that it's not just conservatives who are being swept up in it anymore. The Senate Intelligence Committee is now investigating Jill Stein of the far left, not pejorative, accurate in this case, the far left Green Party, for, you guessed it, alleged collusion with Russia. What did Stein do? It's getting all this attention. Well, in 2015, she had the gall to attend a dinner in Moscow with Vladimir Putin himself. They was sponsored by the television network Russia Today, which of course makes her Ethel Rosenberg. Joe Concha writes for The Hill, and he joins us tonight. So, Joe, here's what struck me about this story. Many things. But one, here you have a political candidate, a politician, going to a dinner sponsored by a news organization. I don't watch RT, okay? I don't agree with RT. But it is a news organization. It's no crazier than some other ones out there, that's for sure. And she's being investigated by the Congress over this. There's no media outcry at all. Everyone acts like this is totally normal. Where are reporters in defending the freedom of the press they often say they believe in this case?
Well, because they're distracted by the blame anybody but Hillary Clinton for losing the 2016 election. I mean, let's think about this now. We have had Bernie Sanders, Jim Comey, Matt Lauer, sexism, white resentment, all blamed for Hillary Clinton's loss. Jill Stein is now part of that equation as well. And the calculus is that if all of Stein's votes in Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Michigan all went to Hillary Clinton magically and not to the Libertarian ticket or Donald Trump, then she would have won those states and therefore the Electoral College. So now a dinner that she had in Russia is being called into question before one vote in the primary was cast. A trip that she paid for on her own. She only bought one aide, and now she's happy to answer any questions. But again, when you're obsessed with Russia this much, you have to bring in as many actors as possible, even ones that have no business being there.
So somehow nobody in the media has noticed that this is a terrifying witch hunt that's gotten so ludicrous it's sweeping up Jill Stein as a secret Russian agent? Does it? I mean, remember studying the McCarthy era when you were in school? And the idea was that people who stood up and sort of, ripped the mask off and called it ludicrous, like Ed Murrow, they were heroes. Where are those people now?
You mentioned aliens before. I think aliens are laughing at us right now when we start including these things. And obviously, the Bob Mueller investigation, if you call that into question as well, then it's considered dangerous or treasonous. And The Hill highlighted a poll from last week. It was from Harvard and Harris. And 54%, a majority, said that they think that Bob Mueller is compromised in this investigation because of his prior relationship with Jim Comey. And you look back at the coverage of Ken Starr and that investigation in 1998 when he was investigating President Clinton. Let me share with you the New York Times from 1998. Headline: White House's all-out attack on Starr is paying off with his help. They talk about, in glowing terms, James Carville, who was the campaign manager for Clinton, saying there's going to be a war. There's another Clinton official who said this is all part of our continuing campaign to destroy Ken Starr. Yeah. And here's one paragraph from this, and you got to hear this. Given the White House's state-of-the-art public relations machine, it is not a surprise that the president has appeared to enjoy the upper hand. Still, Mr. Clinton's partisans say they're amazed by the ease with which they have made Mr. Starr's tactics and not the president's relationship with Ms. Lewinsky the most scrutinized topic. In other words, this was cheered back in 1998.
Oh, I covered
and if
it,
you criticize Mueller, right, I came across a story you wrote, actually, in, I think it was the Weekly Standard, where you talked about that as well. So, yeah, now criticize Mueller, dangerous,
what I guess I find so
then
striking is, look, we've never attacked Mueller as a man on this show. I'm not judging him as a man, but I think all journalists ought to be skeptical of what their government is doing at all levels. But I'm watching journalists on other channels say anybody who asks questions is disloyal, inciting violence, is basically unpatriotic. When did that change? When did journalists become cheerleaders for prosecutions?
Apparently it changed somewhere between 1998 and today. And look, I mean, is it fair to ask why Bob Mueller has 17 attorneys that are on this investigation, a majority of which donated to the Clinton campaign? One actually worked in the Obama administration. Only one donated to Republicans and Democrats. Is that so much to ask, or to question Andrew Weissman's motivations here? Obviously, Peter Strzok, he's not part of the investigation anymore, but those texts were devastating. Yeah. And now I think in the public mind, this is becoming a lot like it did with Ken Starr, where it's looked like it is to be what it may be, a political witch hunt. Maybe there is evidence there. It hasn't been presented yet. But I think now the perception's going that way, just like it did back in the late 90s, Tucker.
It's just distressing to see reporters become lackeys and enforcers of orthodoxy, which is what they've become, sadly. Joe, thank you.
Oh, thank you. And thanks for the tie, by the way. It's a nice match.
The best.
We didn't talk about this.
Well, thanks to migration, one European country could become a third Muslim in just 30 years. But will these changing demographics make Western countries stronger or something else? That's next. Well, for centuries, Europeans fought a series of very costly wars to keep the continent from becoming a Muslim fiefdom. Now Islam is poised to take over peacefully through the simple force of demographic change in Western Europe. A recent study by Pew found that even if all migration ended today, Sweden, France, and the UK would all be about 10% Islamic in 2050. But if the continent experiences high migration,